All right, get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into Neil Gaiman's The Sandman.
Ooh, exciting.
You might be thinking, a comic book, really? But trust me, The Sandman is so much more than just your typical superheroes and villains.
Oh, yeah, way more.
It really dives into some deep questions about storytelling,
Mhm.
reality, and even, what it means to exist.
It really does, and it's fascinating how Gaiman takes these big philosophical ideas and weaves them into this incredibly imaginative world.
Right, it's wild.
We're going to be using this academic paper as our guide today. It's called The Role of Storytelling in Shaping Reality in The Sandman.
Terrific.
And we're going to use it to really unpack how this comic book series suggests that stories aren't just entertainment. They might actually be the very fabric of our reality.
Okay, now that's a thought.
It is, right?
So just to set the stage here,
Yeah.
the Sandman introduces these powerful beings, they're called the Endless,
Right.
and they embody these fundamental aspects of existence, like death, desire, destiny. You get the picture. But the one we're focusing on today is Dream, also known as Morpheus.
Yes. And he rules over this realm called the dreaming.
Okay, the dreaming.
So imagine, the dreaming is where every dream, every myth, every story that's ever been imagined, it all exists.
Right.
It's like this giant library of the human imagination.
That's intense.
And Morpheus, as the Lord of Dreams, is essentially the librarian,
Okay.
the curator of all these narratives.
So every story, every dream I've ever had is floating around in this cosmic library.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's amazing, and also a little creepy, if I'm being honest.
I know, right?
But if stories are this all-encompassing force, like you're saying, how does that actually, play out in The Sandman? How do we see that?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
The Sandman shows us that the dreaming isn't just this passive place where stories just sit there. It's this active force that actually shapes reality itself.
Whoa, okay.
And Morpheus, as the ruler of the dreaming, he has this direct influence on the dreams of humanity. He guides their perceptions and ultimately their realities.
So hold on. He's not just, organizing stories.
No.
He's actively shaping the stories that shape us.
Exactly.
That's meta.
It is.
This is making me think about my own dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they're just nonsense, but other times it feels like my subconscious is trying to tell me something.
Like it's trying to work something out.
Right. Could there be more to them than I realize?
That's exactly the kind of question the Sandman makes us ask.
Yeah.
It suggests that dreams might not just be these reflections of our waking lives.
Right.
They could actually be part of what shapes us, what we believe, how we interact with the world.
Okay, so stories are the fabric of existence. But what kind of fabric are we talking about here?
Wow. I like that.
Is it a delicate silk, a sturdy canvas, or something else entirely?
Good question.
Let's look at some of the characters
Yeah, let's do it.
who show us just how powerful stories can be and how those stories can transform us in ways we might not expect. The paper specifically mentions Rose Walker.
Yes.
Who is she, and what makes her story so significant?
So Rose is a great example of how stories can actually unite people and create empathy.
Okay.
She's what's called a dream vortex, which basically means she has this incredible connection to the dreaming and all its stories. She basically becomes this conduit for countless narratives and experiences.
Right.
And it connects her to people from all walks of life.
So she's like a walking, talking embodiment of the collective unconscious.
Exactly. That idea that we're all connected to this shared pool of stories, fears, and desires.
Right.
And it's through Rose's experiences that we see how stories can create bridges between people. They help us understand each other. They even break down boundaries.
Have you ever read a book or watched a film where you felt deeply connected to the characters, even if their world was totally different from yours?
All the time. It's like you step into their shoes and see the world through their eyes.
Totally. Their struggles become your struggles. Their joys become your joys.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of storytelling.
Yeah.
It allows us to go beyond our own limited perspectives and experience the world through so many other lenses.
Right.
It makes us more empathetic and helps us understand what it means to be human.
I love that.
But, the Sandman doesn't shy away from the darker side of this either.
Right.
The paper also talks about Calliope, and her story is a bit more unsettling.
Yeah, Calliope's story definitely raises some red flags about the ethics of storytelling.
For sure.
For those who don't know, she's a muse,
Right.
a source of inspiration, and she's imprisoned by this writer who wants to use her gift for his own gain.
That's a tough one.
It's like a warning about what happens when we treat stories like they're just products. We forget the power and responsibility that come with them.
It's a cautionary tale for sure.
It is.
It makes us think about the potential consequences of having that kind of narrative power.
Right.
Stories can be a force for good, obviously.
For sure.
But they can also be used to manipulate and control people, silence voices, and even cause harm.
So stories can be this double-edged sword,
Yeah.
capable of both incredible beauty and terrifying destruction.
Exactly.
That's a lot to think about.
It is.
And it makes me wonder about Morpheus himself.
Oh, how so?
He's not just a passive observer in all of this, right?
Definitely not.
He actively shapes narratives.
He does.
But does he always use that power responsibly?
That's a great question. And it's one that the Sandman really grapples with throughout the series.
Okay.
Morpheus is a champion of stories, but he's also made some questionable choices.
Like what?
Well, remember Nada?
Oh, right. The paper mentioned that.
Yeah, Morpheus condemned her to hell for eternity.
It's a stark example of how narratives can be used to control and hurt people.
For sure.
It makes you wonder if even the Lord of Dreams can be corrupted by his own power.
Right. It's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
And the story doesn't necessarily paint him as a villain, but it does make us question whether he actually changes or if he's just changing his methods.
Yeah. Right.
Ultimately, it really highlights the complexities of power and how easy it is to misuse it.
Yeah.
Even when you're dealing with something as seemingly innocent as dreams and stories.
That's unsettling.
Yeah, it is.
But if Morpheus represents that potential for both good and bad, where does desire fit into all of this?
Ooh, good question.
Desire is another endless, right?
Right.
And definitely a more morally ambiguous figure.
Absolutely. Desire is all about manipulation.
Yeah.
Constantly weaving stories to influence others and get what they want,
Right.
often with pretty devastating consequences.
This makes me think about how we're constantly bombarded with stories in our own lives. Advertising, social media, the news.
It's everywhere.
How do we know which stories to trust? Which ones to question? And which ones to just completely reject?
That's such an important question, especially these days.
Yeah.
The Sandman is really reminding us to be critical thinkers, to question the narratives we encounter, and to be mindful of who's telling those stories and what their agenda might be.
Right.
Not all stories are created equal.
Nope.
And some can be dangerous if we're not careful.
Definitely.
So we've got Morpheus, who represents this power and responsibility of storytelling. And then we've got Desire, who embodies the potential for manipulation.
Right.
But where does death fit into all this?
Yeah. She seems like she would have a unique perspective on stories.
Totally.
She sees the ending of everyone's story.
Exactly.
So what's her take?
Well, Death has a really fascinating perspective, and she's not portrayed as the grim reaper you might expect.
Oh, interesting.
She's actually very compassionate, and she uses stories to comfort and guide the souls she encounters.
That's surprisingly comforting.
I know, right?
So she's kind of like a therapist, helping people process their life stories and find peace.
Yeah, in a way.
This makes me wonder about how the stories we tell ourselves and the stories other people tell about us ultimately become our legacy,
Exactly. They shape how we understand ourselves and our place in the world,
Yeah.
both while we're alive and even after we're gone.
And that brings us to another key theme in The Sandman, the connection between stories and identity.
It's a big one.
Even Morpheus, the Lord of Dreams, he goes through his own identity crisis.
He does.
This is making me think about how we all have these stories about ourselves, who we are, who we want to be, what our lives mean. But what happens when those stories don't work for us anymore?
Ooh, good question.
When they hold us back?
Yeah.
When they stop us from growing?
That's when things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And that's something we're going to explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, I'm ready for it. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Back into the dreaming we go.
So far, our exploration of the Sandman has uncovered some seriously mind-bending stuff.
It really has.
Like, this comic book is practically holding up a mirror to our lives, showing us how the stories we tell, the stories we believe, can actually shape our reality.
It's a profound exploration of the power of stories, that's for sure.
It really is.
And one of the most fascinating things the Sandman does is it really highlights this collective power of stories.
Right.
Their ability to connect us across cultures, and even time.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier with the idea of the collective unconscious, right?
Right.
Like we're all tapping into this shared well of stories and myths and archetypes.
Exactly.
This reminds me of those universal myths and legends you find everywhere,
Oh, yeah.
like the hero's journey or the trickster.
Hmm.
What do you think? Is Gaiman tapping into something primal with these themes?
I think so, absolutely.
Right.
The Sandman suggests that there's this deep human need to share stories, to connect through these narratives that really resonate with us on a fundamental level.
Makes sense.
It's how we understand the world, how we find meaning, and how we pass down knowledge and values to the next generation.
That makes me think about how we all contribute to this tapestry of stories, whether we realize it or not.
I like that, a tapestry of stories.
Every time we share a dream, tell a joke, or even just like talk about our day,
Yeah.
we're adding another thread to this massive interconnected narrative.
Exactly. And the Sandman shows us that all those individual threads, when you weave them together, create something much bigger than just the individual parts.
Right.
They create this collective story, a human story, that goes beyond our own experiences and connects us to something larger than ourselves.
I like that. But
Yeah.
if we're all contributing to this collective narrative, like we're all part of this story, does that mean we have a responsibility for the kinds of stories we put out there?
Ooh, that's a big question.
I mean, not all stories are created equal, right?
Definitely not.
Some can be inspiring and uplifting, while others can be harmful, even dangerous.
Yeah, for sure.
Where do we draw the line?
It's a crucial question, and it's one the Sandman doesn't shy away from at all. Remember desire.
Oh, always scheming.
Right.
Yeah.
Desire represents that seductive and often destructive power of stories to mislead and control. But the Sandman also gives us characters like Death,
Right.
who uses her stories to offer comfort and understanding to help people come to terms with their own narrative.
Right, even at the very end.
Exactly. It's a powerful contrast.
It is.
It highlights how stories can be a force for both good and evil, for healing and harm.
For sure.
And it makes you realize how important it is to be mindful of the stories we tell and the stories we choose to believe.
Couldn't agree more.
And it brings us back to Morpheus.
Okay.
He's not just the Lord of Dreams, he's the guardian of stories. And his job is to maintain the balance of the dreaming and ensure that narratives are used responsibly.
Right.
Remember his punishment of nada.
Yeah, that was intense.
It was.
Showed how even Morpheus, the embodiment of storytelling, could misuse his power.
Absolutely.
But he did try to redeem himself, right? Make amends for his past mistakes.
He did, and that's a key part of his arc.
Yeah.
He learns that even the most powerful storyteller can make mistakes, And that owning up to those mistakes and seeking redemption is a crucial part of using narrative power ethically.
So even the Lord of Dreams isn't perfect.
Nope.
That's kind of comforting, actually.
That's right.
Means we're all capable of growth and change, even when it comes to the stories we tell.
Exactly, but Morpheus isn't the only character in The Sandman who struggles with this idea of responsibility.
Oh, right. What about Hob Gatling?
Yes. He's the immortal guy, remember?
Yes, I remember.
Remember how we talked about his unique perspective on time and storytelling?
Yeah.
As an immortal, he gets to see how human stories change over centuries,
Right.
how they reflect different eras and adapt to new challenges.
That's got to be wild.
I know. Imagine seeing history unfold like that.
Right.
Watching how narratives shift and reshape themselves over generations.
That would give you such a sense of the big picture.
It would, and that's why Hobbes' point of view is so interesting. He sees the long arc of human storytelling, the patterns, the themes that stick around, and how these narratives shape our understanding of the world and our place in it.
It's like he's a living, breathing embodiment of collective memory,
I love that.
carrying with him those stories of countless generations.
He really is.
It reminds me of how we often look to history to understand the present, looking for lessons and insights from the stories of those who came before us.
Absolutely, and The Sandman suggests that those stories from the past,
Yeah.
they're not just relics, they're living narratives that continue to influence us today.
Right.
They shape our values, our beliefs, even our actions.
So it's not just about the stories we tell ourselves or each other.
It's bigger than that.
It's also about the stories we inherit from the past,
Yeah.
the narratives that are woven into our culture and our collective consciousness.
Exactly. It's like we're all part of this ongoing conversation, this dialogue between the past, the present, and the future.
And it's all expressed through stories.
Beautifully put.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
And I think one of the key takeaways from the Sandman is this realization that stories aren't just entertainment.
No, they're not.
They're a fundamental part of what makes us human.
Absolutely.
They help us connect, they help us understand, they help us make sense of this crazy world.
They really do.
So, if stories are this powerful, if they really do shape our reality, what does that mean for us?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Like, what's our individual responsibility when it comes to the stories we tell and the stories we choose to believe?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
And it's one we'll definitely dive into in the last part of our deep dive.
All right, can't wait. Welcome back to the deep dive. It feels like we've traveled to another dimension exploring the Sandman.
It has been quite a journey.
This realm where stories aren't just entertainment, but the forces shaping reality.
Yeah. And now, in this final part, we want to bring it all back to you.
Okay.
Because what makes the Sandman so powerful is that it's not just a story about stories. It's an invitation to think differently about the narratives in your own life.
You know, it's funny.
Yeah.
I used to think of stories as something separate from, like, real life.
Yeah.
Like a way to escape.
Right.
But the Sandman is showing me how deeply connected they are. How every choice we make, every belief we hold, it's all part of some kind of personal narrative.
It's a really profound realization, and the Sandman encourages us to become more conscious storytellers,
Okay.
both in our own lives and in the world around us.
So both in the stories we tell and the stories we're consuming.
Exactly.
Because whether you realize it or not, you're constantly telling stories.
It's true.
Although,
the little stories I tell myself
Yeah.
to make sense of a bad day, to the bigger ones about who I am and what I want in life.
Absolutely.
But what does it mean to be a more conscious storyteller?
It starts with awareness.
Okay.
Where do the stories you consume come from? What perspectives are they showing? And what impact are they having on your beliefs and actions? It's like fact-checking for my whole worldview.
Exactly. It makes you realize how much we just accept things without really thinking about them, doesn't it?
It does.
It also means being mindful of the stories you tell yourself.
Right.
Are they helping you or holding you back? Do they really reflect who you are or who you think you should be?
Right. Right.
It reminds me of Morpheus.
Okay.
And his rigid ideas about duty and destiny.
Yeah.
It took a real crisis for him to start changing his own story.
Makes me wonder, what are the stories I'm telling myself that are holding me back?
Yeah, think about that.
Like that story about not being creative enough to try that hobby I've always wanted to do.
See, there you go.
It's about recognizing those narratives and deciding if they're actually working for us.
Exactly. The Sandman shows that even powerful beings like Dream can get trapped by their own stories, but they can also break free and create new ones.
So it's not just about being critical of the stories out there,
Right.
but also the ones we're telling ourselves. That's empowering, but also a little daunting.
It is. But like any skill, conscious storytelling takes practice.
Right.
Start by noticing the narratives you see around you, the ones you buy into and the ones you don't.
Okay.
What values do they promote? Whose voices are being heard? And whose voices are being silenced?
That makes me think about how important it is to have a variety of stories.
Yes.
The Sandman itself draws inspiration from so many different mythologies, cultures, time periods.
It does.
It's not just one narrow perspective.
Exactly. Being exposed to a wide range of stories can help you develop empathy, challenge your assumptions, and just better understand the world around you.
It's like Rose Walker.
Yes.
And how her connection to the dreaming let her experience so many different points of view.
Exactly. She embodies that very idea.
Her story also reminded me that stories can connect us in ways that nothing else can.
Excellent.
That sense of shared experience.
I know what you mean.
Even across vastly different lives.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing.
It really is, and it goes back to that idea that we're all part of this larger story, this collective human experience. The choices we make, the stories we tell, they all contribute to that.
Makes you realize your own life is a story, too.
It is.
With all its ups and downs.
It does.
But it's also part of something so much bigger.
Yeah.
Something that will keep going long after we're gone.
Yeah. That's both humbling and inspiring, isn't it?
It really is.
It reminds us of the responsibility we have as storytellers. What do you want to leave behind? What kind of world do you want your stories to create?
That's a great question.
It is.
It's not just about personal satisfaction anymore.
Right.
It's about contributing to something meaningful.
Yeah.
Something that will make a difference in the world.
I agree.
The Sandman has really made me Rethink what it means to live a good story, not just read one.
That's the magic of the Sandman.
It is.
It's not just about escaping reality. It's about understanding our role in the big story of existence.
As we wrap up our deep dive, what final thought would you leave our listeners with?
Let me see.
Something to think about as they go back to their own lives.
All right, remember this. You are a storyteller. Every day you're writing your story, and that story is shaping the world around you.
Wow.
So choose your words carefully, listen to the stories of others with an open mind and heart, and never underestimate the power you have to make a difference.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And a great note to end on.
I think so.
So if the Sandman has sparked something in you,
Yeah,
we encourage you to explore it more.
absolutely.
Dive back into the comics, listen to the audiobook, talk about it with others who've also experienced it.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe it'll even inspire you to create a new story of your own,
That would be awesome.
one that contributes to a more just, compassionate, and wondrous world.
Keep dreaming.
Until next time,
Yeah.
sweet dreams, everyone.